So Paula,
yeah.
Over to you.
Ready here.
Good.
Yeah. Good afternoon. It's great to see that there are still some faces around. Well, what I'm going to talk to today is about some of the work we have been doing around the distribution of benefits and these benefits from enclosure areas in Ethiopia. And this is work we have been developing with colleagues in Scotland at the James Hutton Institute, but also in Ethiopia with Hawassa University and the International Water Management Institute, and as part of the ALTER project, which is funded by the ESPA program. And the focus of this, one of the main aims of this project is to understand better the links between soil, ecosystem services, and poverty. So in the area where we work in Ethiopia, there has been an increased soil degradation since the 70s, and part of this has been linked to political changes, but also to demographic changes and changes in livelihoods and deforestation. And along this soil degradation, what has happened as well has been a decrease in the productivity, in agricultural productivity, which has also increased the reliance of people on inputs such as inorganic fertilizers. So to halt this situation, there have been several approaches, and one of them has been to restore and to enclose communal lands for restoration, and that will be the focus of this talk. So enclosure or exclosure areas. I'm still not sure which one is the right word. So if anyone knows, please tell me. So these enclosure areas have been done in degraded communal lands that before were forests and also grazing areas. And it has been happening since the 80s till now. So the oldest ones date back to the 80s, but there are a few ones that date back to 5 years ago or less than that. And the main purpose of these areas is to keep livestock and humans out and get the trees grow. Most of these areas are governed by local forest committees, but with a strong advice from agriculture officers. And there has been different ways of enclosing the areas and how they are regenerated with like native species or exotic species such as eucalyptus, through planting or just letting the vegetation regenerate. And the basic approach, like the basic assumption is that, well, by enclosing these areas, the soil improves, there is less erosion, less flooding problems, and at the same time, there is timber and non-timber products that people can use. So it seems like quite a happy story, but, and that's where we're interested in analyzing what are actually those benefits, how they are distributed, but also what are these benefits of these areas. And yeah. So we had 3 study sites in Halaba, and Halaba is located in the southern nationalities people region in the south of Ethiopia. And most of the farmers are small-scale farmers with less than 2 hectares. And they use a variety of crops. Maize is the staple crop. And some of them, they also have livestock. Between 70% and 90% of the land is farmland, and about 10 to 25% of the land is used for these exclosure areas. The way these areas have been established is a bit different, so they vary in size, in age, but also in the composition and management. So we use a variety of methods, all qualitative, though the project also has some quantitative methods. So for this, what I'm going to present today, we use a combination of participatory mapping, photo voice, and focus groups. And we did it with separate groups of men and women from the communities. And afterwards, we did a qualitative analysis of themes, of emerging themes. So the participatory mapping, as it word says, it's to draw a map with the community and to identify. So for this, we just took some big paper sheets and asked the community to identify Key places in the area, such as, well, the mosque, these are Muslims communities, the school, the exclosure areas, and also the areas where people benefit and disbenefit from the environment. Afterwards, we hand in cameras, and after a few trials, we went with the people to those areas where they just wanted to take a photo to show these benefits or these benefits. And we came back to the room or just outside and went through these photos and discussed, well, what they wanted to show us with those photos. What were the benefits, what were the disbenefits, who benefit, who disbenefit, and the way they deal with the distribution of these benefits and benefits as well. So I'm going to go through a few of these findings. So obviously, yeah, it's true, like there are a lot of benefits, such as reduced erosion and flooding, but this depends in many cases on where the village or the household is located, whether it's upstream or downstream. In general, they also identify better air quality linked to the trees, because the areas produce some products that can be sold. They also generate some income from the village, and this is used to construct schools or other types of facilities for the community. But also the way these benefits, such as building materials, thatch, fodder, bees, and honey, are distributed depends on the and generated depends on the forest composition, such as the age and species, but also on of the rules, so how the quota that each member of the community receives and the prices that have to pay for the product, how much is tracked. And also what we found is that in general, wealthier people have the means to circumvent the rules in many cases. So even though everyone in the community is entitled to a quota, what happens very often is that the richer people actually buy the quota of the poorer because the price is still a bit lower than the market, and then they can resell it. And at the same time, in the cases where they do not comply with the rules and are sanctioned, they have the means to, they can afford the fines compared to the poorer. At the same time, there are these benefits generated. So one of the things they said is that there is a loss of access to the grazing areas. Well, but at the same time, there were not really a lot of grazing areas because it was quite degraded. But there are a lot of also crop damages from wild animals because, well, because the vegetation regenerates, that also creates a new ecosystem with monkeys and warthogs and porcupines and other animals coming back to there. And that has an impact on the food security, poverty, and health. And that impact is not distributed equally across the community. So the people who have their farmland quite close to the enclosure areas bears most of the cost of this because the animals just, they are the closest ones. And and this has also, so wealth also affects how people deal with the different impacts. So there is, and this is some of the things that we discussed there. So there is, for example, a poverty relief program, but what the question is whether this is actually a consequence rather than proactive. So the people who have lost lots of things, they can form part of this work for food program, but it's not like a means of supporting livelihoods, but a means of coping with what they have lost. Another thing that they have done is to give up the land, because actually they can lose up to 75% of the harvest. But again, this seems to be more a consequence than like a proactive measure. They used to talk about fences, but they often are not very effective. Another thing they usually do is to guard the crops, so they take turns, like with the children included, to just spend the night there, checking that the animals do not get into the plot. But that has impacts on the health and the energy they have to dedicate to other activities. Another option is that they suggest is to switch to different crop or land use, but maize is the main staple there, and one of the reasons, apart of the cultural part of using it as a food, is because they can use the whole crop for different lots of different uses. And another option that they gave was hunting, but at the moment, the environmental protection law doesn't allow hunting, so that will be an illegal practice. And I think this is my last slide, so really very brief. So what we observe is that actually benefits, and these benefits are not balanced and are unequally distributed across the community and across communities. There is apparently an official success of these areas, but what we found when we did the focus groups on the ground is that there is a strong local dissatisfaction. And part of this, and this will have implications for the long-term sustainability of programs like that. Because in the moment, they are handed out to the local, not sure for how long they will survive like this. And so one of the options that we were discussing also in the groups is what will be different means of balance and distribute in a different way the benefits and also the disbenefits. And one way is, change the rules, how things are actually distributed, how quotas are established, and the price people have to pay for that. But also how decision-making takes place. And also how actually these enclosures areas are set up and established, and whether there is a need to balance a bit more the environmental benefits and also the livelihood benefits, for example, with the types of species that are planted. So one of the things they suggest is more like a combination of eucalyptus that grows quite quickly and they can use the timber, but also with fruit crops that at the same time they can harvest the fruits and use for food. And I think that was me. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Paula. Well, is it about enclosures, exclosures? We'll see. Now, questions for her? One, who else has question or comment? Two. Okay, let's start from you. Since we have, quite some time. After your question, she will respond before we come to you.
Thank you for that. My name is Nicole Grosskamp from University College London. I wonder, I may have missed that, and I apologize, but I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how these areas are formed. Was it driven, who was kind of driving that process, and what the involvement of the communities were, and the kind of duration of them, like how old are they? You said it rose in the 1980s, but were they, I imagine there's sort of some staggering, and are any of them reopened to community use?
Yeah.
So thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So they were established, in a rather top-down way, in consultation with the local people, but as a solution. So in for example, in one of the communities, it was after a big drought, and what they said is like the government officials went there and suggest that this was one of the ways to deal with that and to start regenerating the vegetation. It's quite a sensitive issue to what extent people actually have the power to decide over these areas. And at the moment, there is a local forest committee with local people, but that decide on some things, for example, on when to harvest the thatch, or how to use, But other things, for example, the timber, is decided at the agriculture office level. So there is, depending for what uses, decisions are taken by some or another people. And also the 3 different areas are not managed in the same way. So for example, in one of them, people were much happier about the enclosure areas, but was partly because there were other things happening within the enclosure areas. For example, they had established an NGO program with the World Bank, I think, was women cooperative, where they could use more for grazing, where they could use for grazing the area. They saw more benefits, more kind of tangible benefits coming from it. where in other places that was not allowed, and also what also happens with the age, when they get older, there is more timber, but there are less of these kind of more continuous benefits that they can get, such as grass for livestock or thatch or things like that. So is it once they're in this kind of management regime, they don't change? Like, what? Sorry. No, well, also it takes quite a while to regenerate the vegetation. So some of them have been there, for now 20, 30, more than 20 years, Some are, and also the approach is changing. So they are moving much more towards a bit of a more active involvement of people in actually using the land instead of just enclosing and not allowing anything happening there apart from regeneration.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think we can continue that after the closing session. So the next question or comment?
Yeah, my question is also to ask you to develop a bit more of your presentation in terms of you use participatory methods in order to collect more information, and some of the information was really interesting in terms of inequalities and different kind of relationship between the very poor and the not so poor. How did you deal with this form of participatory data collection around the sensitivity of certain points being discussed, particularly in terms of ethical implications of disclosing these unequal relationships within the community, and particularly in the context of participatory video technique you used?
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I didn't put a lot on the actual data that we collected with the photo voice because, well, so the objective of the photo voice was much broader than just look at enclosure areas. Like we were looking at the whole community. And it's true, like some things are not that easy that they don't come just the first thing. For example, the circumvention of rules or theft. But so you need, after maybe 2 hours, then they speak openly about it. I mean, they don't point anyone, but they come. I mean, I didn't see, I saw kind of, it was harder when you talk about decision making and who takes the decisions that actually, like when these kind of things happen, if there is sanctions, like for example, they say like, well, theft is very rare, but in the few cases, maybe 2 cases that has happened, and probably they are underestimating, but they actually talk about it, and there was not like a big problem.
Okay. A comment?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what, please be?
Okay. We went to evaluate this project two weeks ago, and what I can share maybe directly in answer to what he's asking is that the government in Ethiopia is very powerful, and it is not to share power between a sort of a government that controls everything and people who have to accept what the government says. So one of in the first area that she talked about, the Kebele, that is big, about almost 230 acres. It has been secluded for 22 years up to this moment in time. So for 22 years, there has been this enclosure, and people are not allowed access there. And they have had volunteers who act like forest guards, and they are paid as a pittance by the government to do this job. And what struck us is how difficult it is to have institutions accept evidence for decision making, because the decisions are made from the headquarters, which is in Addis Ababa, but the reality that the people have to live with is so far away from what the policymakers actually know, but they continue to insist that this exclusion goes on. Secondly, the guards who are paid something small to take care of this forest, in fact, I wish I had brought my camera and I show you a photograph of a gentleman, one of the guards who, walking about 8 kilometers when we went round to look at the river and everything else, he did not have shoes on. And I would like you to imagine walking through the forest with thorns, forest that is establishing for the last 20 years or so, Yes, and this guy doesn't have shoes. He has a spear, and he's expected to, of course, take care of this resource, and the resource is not delivering to the poor. And one of the slides she's put up there that shows benefit, how the rich can escape the consequences of the enclosure. Because they can steal, if they are caught, they'll pay the fine. The poor, if they stole, they cannot pay the fine, so they have to lose maybe a goat or something like that. So the poor, it's actually disenfranchising the poor. And the questions that we have, which we are sharing with the implementation team, is how can we actually try to change the framing of this approach in order to address the poor aspect. And it is not an easy project, and it is not actually very easy working in Ethiopia, because it is also very difficult to reach the people who actually make the decisions. But this is one of the most beautiful things about ESPA, that we can be able to also have some convening around these questions and get some of the relevant departments like DFID who can reach some of those offices. And we are looking forward probably next year to have a round table where we can discuss some of these emergent issues and hopefully be able to intervene at higher level. But at the level at which the project right now is located, it is very difficult to move. And I think she's trying to be very polite about it. Because
I'm on the video. Come on.
Yeah, so I just thought to add that comment. Thank you.
I think this addition is really much value addition to the presentation. So thank you very much, Sam. Now, Paula, we will relieve you and allow you to go back to your seat.
Yeah.
Let's give her a round of applause. She has done so well. So thank you very much. Now we have come to the final session. I would like to invite Atiq to the front. Atiq is the co-chair of the International Program Advisory Committee. So let's give him a round of applause. He will be making some remark on talk 27, ESPA Past, Present, and Future, looking beyond 2015 and the SDGs. And then we have with him on the table Craig. Craig is from the Economic and Social Research Council. So we're happy you are with us this afternoon, Craig. He will be making the closing remarks, and we hope to do this within the next 30 minutes at most. So I give the mic to you now.
We could do it short. We could do a short time. Nice to be here. Apologies for missing yesterday's proceedings. I got a feedback. Things are going reasonably well. My own feeling is that the early results of ESPA is just coming. As Professor Atkinson has reported some of those as in a review, that early results are already being published. Some are on the way. So ESPA as a scientific enterprise is gradually asserting its presence. That's much more within the scientific community. Is it being visible within the policy community, within the community of the beneficiaries, which is the poor and the ecosystem? Ecosystem cannot shout and write its papers and mobilize politicians. So for that, the voice has to be through action. As for the poor, they are often disorganized and are not assertive until and unless push comes to shove and they're on the last edge of their tolerance or survival. So poor are also not very, have a strong voice across. I may be wrong, I may be biased, but what I heard today was excellent input into various directions, particularly the whole issue of data and how we use data and the quality. My own ears may be deceiving me, but I heard more about ecosystem less about poverty alleviation. But I hope that's not my bias. We have to, ESPA, as we went around over the years, over the 3 years already, we have been seeing that all the calls for integration, multidisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity is more about, this is my discipline and this is what I write. However, we recognize there is more of social science, or the social scientists saying we do our part, but we also recognize there is natural science, biological sciences, other sciences, governance issues, which is part of it social science, part of it is cutting across the science of governance, if you want to call it. So how much of we is integrating? In our scientific development, one or two very good cases where multiple disciplines have made major progress is areas of, say, genetics, where chemists knew a bit of chemistry and it was emerging in the 50s. The physicists knew their physics and electronics was just coming up, and computers were being assertive or being in the world. And biologists knew biology better, and biologists and chemists working together gave rise to biochemistry. We started understanding blood better. We started understanding human development. We understood brain has different functions and various other, biochemical. And in came computer at that time to resolve some of this complex DNA that, chemists could not do on their own. It's so complex systems. So combination of those gave rise to the rapid biological sciences, particularly genetics, that came about. And from genetics, I think, most of the many new cures of illnesses one is looking at, medical science application, etc. So those are type of examples. I'm not saying that ESPA will follow that route. But that is a type of integration that takes place when various disciplines come together and new horizons open. Similarly, the same thing has happened to cell phones. Cell phone was a function of military secrets and etc. for many, many decades. Then in came the satellites, and they were in the public domain, coming out of the defense domain, and, cell phone with its need, etc., came out. And right now, cell phone is a tremendous system that has evolved. I was just telling the story to somebody. The lady who lives with us and works, helps us get our food. I said, madam, you are sort of really not literate in this sense that could we start with the alphabets or something? And she said, no, that's not true. I have my cell phone. Now I have to write my son's number, so I write my son's first name, whatever she could pronounce, and I have the number, so I'm numerate, I'm literate. Nobody had to teach me this. So, the link between systems coming down, which is technologically advanced, to helping somebody who is using it to learn, and same is happening to the pricing of agricultural commodities in village systems, etc. So integration, another integration today, I heard the appeal for urban, greater emphasis on urban. I, for one, believe that in most developing countries, in urban advanced or technologically, industrially advanced countries, the stories are slightly different, where people want urban facilities in rural setting. They want to go out of Washington and live in Bethesda or somewhere to listen to the birds in the morning and then go back and do the things and go back. So urban, rural, there is a continuum there. In the developing world, I see urban, rural, a tremendous continuum. We have done a lot of research where we have shown that people who live in the slums You ask them, what is your home? They don't talk about the slum at all. They talk about the home they left 20 years ago. So their identity and all that goes on. So we are seeing the beginning of this integration amongst the ESPA community, and some of the research, particularly the methodological issues, methodological challenges we have heard from, I think the highest amount we have heard is about methodological challenges, data challenges and utility. But at one level, ESPA is running at its own speed, own velocity of research, which has its own, time scale. The other way, the global changes that are taking place having its own velocity. Climate change is faster than we ever thought climate change would happen. And our governance institutional changes are probably not being able to do as fast as we want. Steve made that point, others made that point quite vigorously. So to enable those institutional changes, we need good science. Science has its independent value, but it makes rationalizing those decisions for change a bit more evident and makes it better. This is across, rich countries, poor countries, north and south, where institutions are meant to have inertia of rest. You have to change it, you have to change the gear, we have to force it, we have to talk to people. And some opportunities, as they say, this proverbial elevator talk. If you are on an elevator, you meet your prime minister, what do you say in 30 seconds? That will not come if your research is not robust and ready unless you want to talk nonsense. You want to talk something sensible, that has to be synthesized. And that synthesis will come from rigorous work. So I think we are in another 1.5 years to go for ESPA. Is that about right? So within that regime, we have to draw a lot of things close. Tomorrow, we, as the advisory committee, will be meeting, and we'll be talking some of the other issues. But I think Kate and I just thought about, as co-chairs, to talk a little forward-looking ways. How do we move forward? And methodologically, how do you bring many of the issues? But the conflicts are real. Any of these conflicts in methodology and database, these are real. We cannot hide them under the carpet. These are real, but that itself gives us the energy and the resource for intellectual dialogue, which then opens new horizons of research and new horizons of work. But the ESPA community has become now large enough. We are probably somewhat ready. There was a whole discussion about carrying the message of ESPA to various levels. And at one stage, Paul and us, we have been talking about trying to influence the agenda in SDG and everything. And we said, no, SDG has its own momentum and it's happening in a certain direction. What we need to do is to get our science more robust, methodologically, intellectually, in coverage, in levels of scale up, and all those decisions are complex. So to be fair to the funding organizers, the government of UK and all the agencies, is that it's a reasonable sum through which certain changes can be done. I mean, 1/3 of this money would not have been able to make the difference that one tends to make. So the magnitude is not too bad. The question is how all the research and the result that's coming up, where is the, not just synthesis, where is the coexistence of these giving us new frontier of knowledge that will be useful to the communities and to the ecosystem. Now, until and unless poverty in SDG 1, MDG 1 has been quite, I think, moderately successful in terms of focusing or prioritizing poverty. And we should be able to do that through the SDGs again, but we have to give our input. And ecosystem is the base from which all the resources come, particularly to the poor. And it has been shown beyond reasonable doubt that poor depend on the ecosystem far more, particularly at the time of vulnerability, floods, disaster, cyclones, drought. They rely on that. Just to give you an example, in Bangladesh, the villages during the flood period collect about 21 types of nutritious vegetable from the floodplain during that time. And we did a calculation. If there was a World Bank project had to deliver that amount of nutrition to the poor, we are talking of billions of dollars. Now, nature is providing that. This has never been quantified. So there are all these resources that are potential, and we have to try and understand that. Methodologically, we are challenged because we understand our own methods, and learning other methods, doing it in a robust way, has its own challenges built in. So I would say that we have made good progress. 1.5 years is sort of time we have in our hand. We are thinking about what do you go from here, and that's something at the level of ESPA Secretariat, the management group led by Steve, the International Advisory Board, Kate, myself, John, many others, and the agencies who have been funding it, DFID, NARC, they will all be talking about it, looking at it, and before we know, 1 year would have gone, and we have to get ready as to where we go from here. But it is definite that SDG has given us an impetus, because they are now crying for how to measure indicators, how to give reply to some of these questions. Can we really do it? Are these doable in the 15 years ahead? In a rapidly changing world, changing in globalization, changing in climate change, changing in poverty dimension, politics, plus some of the other realities that is hitting us. Those of us who have been interested in Paris Conference of Climate Change, suddenly we see that climate change is probably not the central issue in Paris right now. So there are other changes beyond our control. And I don't know whether you heard about this. I heard it only yesterday in Stockholm in a meeting of all multi-faiths talking about climate change. And that in the Plaster Republic, the main gathering will not happen. They will not be allowed to have a big gathering. So the organizers have thought, if everybody, rather than coming themselves, could send their pair of shoes just to show what is happening. And a pair of shoes have been asked from the Pope's office for Pope's pair of shoes. And the gentleman who is in charge of this is now scratching his hair whether he should give it and what's the politics of this, etc., etc. So, there are issues beyond us. ESPA is not the only world that is existing. We are all doing multiple research ourselves. So, best wishes to all of you for the next rapid one, but question of putting all the results out as soon as possible, of high quality, methodology correct, hoping to bring, I don't know whether it's right to say ESPA science. Will there be such a thing where ecosystems and poverty elevation will simultaneously move, called ESPA science? We'll have to wait for that. In this very room, there was a discussion or meeting of all the modelers, where they thought that integrated modeling of ESPA type would be something that would come out in the future. We are waiting for that sort of thing to happen. But nonetheless, congratulations to all of you. You've done the hard work, and it is the beginning of something very interesting, where multidisciplinarity is supported and encouraged, and we come to the end of that. And thanks for giving me this space to share these views. It's been wonderful being here, and we'll continue what we've heard from you. We will use that as a basis for our discussions tomorrow in our International Advisory Board. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Atiq. That's an excellent wrap-up of what we have discussed over the last 2 days. But in addition to that, let me say that right from the word go yesterday, from Belinda's presentation and all through listening to the various talks, one thing is clear, that ESPA science deals with complex systems. And if we listen carefully to Jeff yesterday when he was making presentation about the SDGs, you will see that the SDGs is what I may call a global attempt to simplify development, which also is a complex issue. And the ESPA science, ESPA impact, we have a challenge from the two ends. How do we ensure that when we get out of this room, we make these two complex issues to come together? I think that's the challenge for the post-2015 ESPA. That from the side of the science itself, which, like Atiq rightly said, those of you in this room, you've worked so hard, you've done so much, okay? You've have fantastic methodologies, you've accumulated fantastic data, and from the impact itself, we can see that many of the projects have something to do at the community level, okay? Which means really there's some impact. The extent and the scope may be another issue. I mean, that could be areas where we need to make improvements, but there's been impact at the community level. So at the end of the day, as we wrap up, let's take note that from the two ends of science and from the two end of, from the other end of development, they are both complex. But we have a challenge that as we go beyond here, how do we ensure that we simplify them, we are innovative in such a way that at the science end, at the development end, there are clear impacts. So thank you very much. I think on this note, we want to ask Craig to make the final remarks as we close the meeting.
Thank you, John. I think I'd like to make just a couple of reflections before wrapping things up, but I'll be quite brief. This is my third ESPA Science Conference that I've been able to attend, at least partly. And I think I'd just like to reflect that there's been a change. When I came here for the first time a couple of years ago, we had a very interesting set of projects and presentations that were having some interesting interactions. But what I saw coming here today and what I heard coming here today is really the development of a real research community. And I think that's very important. I mean, at the research councils, in funding science, we know interdisciplinary research is really difficult. It's hard. There's a lot of factors that pull researchers in different directions back into their disciplinary silos. And I think one of ESPA's greatest successes is that it really seems to have established this community of research practice that cuts across disciplinary bounds. And so what we've had today is a conversation, and I think a really interesting and a really valuable conversation around synthesis and impact. And I think it's been about a year or so that the program executive board has been really talking about the need for the program to shift once we sort of finished the main commissioning phase into the research and then into a sort of phase of synthesis and trying to maximize impact. And that is coming to the fore very strongly, and that's really fantastic to see. Particularly that it doesn't feel like it's something that we as the funders are forcing down people's throats. I mean, it's been a very engaged, interesting conversation and such a broad range of the types of issues that can be synthesized from methodologies to geographies in urban and a range of others. But particularly, I mean, the conversation here today has also taken impact in a new direction. Again, it hasn't felt like people sort of grumbling to fill out their pathways to impact, but really moving it beyond even just the kind of notion of a commodity chain of science producing evidence that then gets used, but starting to focus on the traditional knowledge systems of the decision makers and the users of research, and how you actually frame the science in terms that relates to them and is meaningful. And I think that's really a productive and interesting direction to take the impact agenda. So I've had a very interesting time today. I circled the world in that conversation. Trust, I think, is a really another interesting concept that has come up a number of times today and really should potentially be put at actually the center of how we think about delivering impact from research. It's not just about putting the science out there in an accessible way. It's making sure the people that need to use it can trust it and understanding why they may or may not. So on that note, I think there's not a lot I can say, but I can say a little bit about sort of the future from a research funder perspective. I mean, we are, after a long period of sort of waiting for things to happen, we are now getting swamped with reviews. We had Paul Nurse's review of the research councils. We've had the higher education green paper. We've had the new UK aid strategy. And of course, yesterday we had the comprehensive spending review. So we're still trying to sort of digest all of that and figure out what all it really means and what lies under the headlines. But I think there are a few directions of travel that are quite clear. I mean, one, the demand is going to be more for the type of big interdisciplinary research that ESPA can do so well. It's going to be more about engaging with the really big global grand challenges. Again, which the scale of an ESPA program requires, and the complexity that accompanies that scale is a challenge that needs to be worked through. And I think, I mean, my quick summary, and I may have gotten this wrong, but my sense from the sort of the new aid strategy is that it's a shift from just, you know, a focus on the poorest countries and the poorest people to tackling the most difficult problems. And I think that that shift, if that's what it really means, presents a lot of opportunities for a really interesting alignment of interdisciplinary science with the aid strategy. So, you know, watch this space, keep up the fantastic work that's going on, and hopefully there will be many more exciting things in the future coming from this program and similar. So having said that, there's just a few sort of things I'd like to wrap up. First of all, with all these fascinating discussions of synthesis, there's a town hall about the 2016 call on the 28th of January. Initial registration is supposed to happen by the 4th of December. So if you haven't already done that and you're interested in that call, go to the NERC website and track it down. And then finally, I'd just like to thank all the people that made this possible. Particularly, and because I've come in here at the last minute, I'm not going to even try to get everybody's name, but everybody here from the ESPA Directorate who puts in so much work to pull off these events, and it really is a lot of work, and everybody from the NERC Business Assurance Unit here today. I'd just like to say thank you very much, and I think we should all thank those people for all their efforts to make this conference happen. And then just one final thing, I'd like to say thanks to Paul Van Gaardegen, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but I expect sooner or later he's going to be watching the entire feed. But again, unfortunately he wasn't able to be here today, but his spirit and his enthusiasm and his energy infuses every aspect of the ESPA program, and I think we all acknowledge that we wouldn't be here without his efforts. So thanks to Paul. And then we can close the meeting. Thank you.